When Ethan Brooks walked into that downtown bar on a Tuesday night in October, he had no idea he was about to make the most embarrassing and life-changing mistake of his career. Fresh off the worst breakup of his life, nursing wounds from a girlfriend who'd called him emotionally unavailable, he was supposed to meet a blind date his sister had set up. Instead, he approached the wrong woman at the wrong table and asked, with forced humor masking his misery, "Please tell me you're here to save me from this disaster of a night." The woman looked up from her wine glass, and Ethan's heart stopped. It wasn't some stranger. It was Claire Monroe, the CEO of Apex Marketing Solutions, the woman who signed his paychecks, the untouchable executive he'd only seen from across conference rooms. And she was smiling. Before you find out how one joke turned into the most dangerous love story of their lives, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The rain had started 20 minutes ago, turning the October evening into a blur of wet pavement and neon reflections. Ethan Brooks stood outside the Copper Bell, a downtown bar he'd never been to before, watching through the fogged glass as people laughed and clinked glasses inside. His phone buzzed in his pocket for the 5th time. He didn't need to check it. He knew it was his sister Emma, asking if he'd chickened out yet. He should have. 6 hours ago, his girlfriend of 2 years had walked out of their apartment with a suitcase and a speech he'd heard before but never really listened to. "You're never really here, Ethan. You work, you sleep, you exist, but you don't live. I can't be with someone who's only half present." Jessica had said it calmly, like she'd rehearsed it, and maybe she had. Maybe she'd been planning this for months while he buried himself in spreadsheets and campaign metrics, convincing himself that climbing the ladder at Apex Marketing Solutions was the same thing as building a life. It wasn't. Now he was standing in the rain because Emma had insisted, with that blend of sympathy and stubbornness only little sisters possessed, that the worst thing he could do was sit alone in that empty apartment. "I already set it up," she'd said. "Her name's Rachel. She's a graphic designer. You'll like her. Just go, talk to someone who isn't a colleague or a client, and remember what it feels like to be human." Ethan pushed through the door. The warmth hit him first, then the noise. A wall of conversation and laughter that made his chest tighten. He scanned the room, looking for a woman sitting alone, presumably checking her phone nervously, presumably as reluctant about this setup as he was. He spotted her near the back, at a corner table with soft lighting, dark hair falling past her shoulders, a wine glass half empty. She was looking down at something on the table, her posture relaxed in a way that suggested she wasn't nervous at all. Ethan took a breath and walked over. "Please tell me you're here to save me from this disaster of a night," he said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack his face. The woman looked up. Time stopped. It wasn't some poetic exaggeration, some romantic notion he'd write off later. Time genuinely seemed to freeze as Ethan's brain caught up with what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't Rachel, the graphic designer. This wasn't some friend of Emma's who tolerated bad first dates and awkward small talk. This was Claire Monroe, CEO of Apex Marketing Solutions, the woman whose signature was on every major company decision, the executive whose quarterly addresses Ethan had sat through, always 3 rows back, always invisible in the crowd of middle management. She was 36, brilliant, and so far above his pay grade that they existed in different stratospheres. And she was looking at him with an expression that was part amusement, part curiosity, and part something else he couldn't identify. "That depends," Claire said, her voice carrying the same calm authority he'd heard in boardrooms. "What kind of disaster are we talking about?" Ethan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His brain was screaming at him to apologize, to back away, to explain that he'd made a mistake and was looking for someone else. Instead, he stood there like an idiot, still holding his jacket, rain dripping onto the hardwood floor. Claire tilted her head slightly. "You're Ethan Brooks, marketing specialist. 3rd floor. You ran the Harrison campaign last spring." He found his voice. "You know who I am?" "I know everyone who works for me," she said simply. "Or at least I try to. You did good work on that project. Exceeded projections by 18%. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Are you going to sit, or are you going to keep standing there looking like you've seen a ghost?" "I should go," Ethan managed. I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else. I'm meeting someone, and I thought, you thought I was your blind date, Claire finished. There was no judgment in her voice, just stated fact. Let me guess. Sister, friend, well-meaning relative who thinks you need to get out more? Sister, Ethan admitted. They mean well, Claire said. She took a sip of her wine, and Ethan noticed for the first time that she looked tired. Not in an obvious way. Her makeup was perfect, her dark blazer was tailored and expensive, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of exhaustion that went deeper than just a long day. Mine keeps trying to set me up with her husband's colleagues. Apparently being alone at 36 is a tragedy that requires intervention. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He glanced around this bar, looking for the woman he was actually supposed to meet, but saw no one else sitting alone. She's not here yet, Claire said, reading his search accurately. Your actual date. You've got time. She gestured again to the chair. Sit, unless you'd rather stand in the rain for another 20 minutes pretending to check your phone. He shouldn't have sat down. Every professional instinct he possessed told him to politely excuse himself, find his actual date when she arrived, and never speak of this moment again. But something in Claire's expression, that exhaustion, that hint of loneliness she'd revealed for just a second, made him pull out the chair. One drink, he heard himself say, until she gets here. One drink, Claire agreed. Ethan sat down, hyper-aware of every movement, every word. This was his boss's boss's boss. This was the woman whose decisions shaped the entire company. And he was sitting across from her in a bar, on what was decidedly not a business meeting. So, Claire said, swirling her wine glass gently, what made tonight such a disaster? You don't want to hear about my problems, Ethan said automatically. I asked, didn't I? She met his eyes, and there was something challenging in her gaze, something that suggested she was tired of people telling her what she did or didn't want. I'm sitting in a bar alone on a Tuesday night, drinking wine that's overpriced and underwhelming. Trust me, I'm open to distraction. Ethan hesitated. Then, maybe because the day had already been so surreal that nothing seemed to matter anymore, he told her. My girlfriend left me this morning. 2 years together, and she walked out because apparently I'm emotionally unavailable and only half present. Her words, not mine. Claire's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry. Don't be. She was right. The admission surprised him. He hadn't said it out loud yet, hadn't let himself acknowledge that Jessica's criticism had landed because it was true. I work 60-hour weeks. I bring my laptop home. I schedule my life like it's a campaign that needs optimizing. I forgot her birthday last year. Actually forgot it. Who does that? Someone who's trying very hard to prove something, Claire said quietly. What am I trying to prove? That you matter, that you're valuable, that if you just work hard enough, everything else will fall into place. She took another sip of wine. It's a lie we tell ourselves. I should know. I've been telling myself that lie for 15 years. Ethan stared at her. This wasn't the CEO he'd seen in quarterly meetings, delivering polished speeches about growth and innovation. This was someone else entirely, someone raw and honest in a way that felt almost dangerous. What happened to you? He asked before he could stop himself. Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You want the short version or the long one? We've got until my date shows up. Fair enough? She set down her wine glass and folded her hands on the table. I spent the last 8 years with someone who said he loved me, but was never actually there when it mattered. Business dinners where he was too busy checking his phone. Family events he skipped because something came up. Plans we made that he canceled at the last minute. I told myself it was fine because we were both ambitious, both building careers, both understanding about the demands of success. She paused. Yesterday was my father's funeral. David didn't come. He texted me 2 hours before the service saying he had a meeting he couldn't miss. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Jesus. I broke up with him last night, Claire continued, her voice steady but her eyes distant. 8 years, and I ended it over the phone because I finally understood that I'd been alone the entire time. I just hadn't been willing to admit it. I'm sorry, Ethan said, and meant it. I don't even know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything. That's the thing about sitting in a bar with a stranger. You can just listen. She met his eyes again. Except you're not a stranger, are you? You work for me. This is wildly inappropriate. Probably, Ethan admitted. Should I go? Claire considered the question for a long moment. No, she said finally. I don't think you should. A waitress appeared at their table, young and cheerful, seemingly oblivious to the weight of the conversation she'd interrupted. Can I get you anything? Ethan looked at Claire, then at his watch. His blind date was now officially 15 minutes late. Whiskey, he said. Neat. Another wine, Claire added. The Malbec, not whatever that first glass was. The waitress nodded and disappeared. Claire leaned back in her chair, studying Ethan with an intensity that should have made him uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you really approach me? Before you realized who I was, I mean. What made you pick this table? Ethan thought about it. You looked like you were waiting for someone. And you looked... He hesitated. What? Like you might understand what it feels like to have a terrible day and show up anyway. Something shifted in Claire's expression. That's more honest than I expected. Yeah, well, it's been that kind of day. The drinks arrived. Ethan took a sip of whiskey and felt the burn spread through his chest. Across from him, Claire did the same with her wine, and for a moment they sat in comfortable silence. Your date's not coming, Claire said eventually. Ethan checked his phone. 25 minutes late now, and no messages. Apparently not. My sister set me up once, Claire said. 3 years ago. The guy took one look at me, asked what I did for a living, and spent the entire dinner talking about his startup idea. He wanted funding. That was the whole date. A pitch meeting disguised as romance. That's awful. It was clarifying, Claire corrected. It taught me that most people don't see me. They see the title, the company, the potential connection. But not me. She swirled her wine. What about you? Does anyone see you? The question landed harder than it should have. Ethan thought about Jessica's accusations, about Emma's worried interventions, about the way his colleagues knew him as the guy who always said yes to extra projects, but never joined them for drinks afterward. No, he said honestly. I don't think they do. Then we're both invisible, Claire said. Just in different ways. Is that why you're here? Hiding in a bar where no one knows you? I'm not hiding. I'm just... She stopped, reconsidered. Yes, I'm hiding. From well-meaning friends who want to check on me, from my mother who keeps calling to discuss the funeral arrangements like I'm incompetent, from a company that needs me to be strong and decisive tomorrow morning. Tonight, I just wanted to be someone else. Who did you want to be? Claire laughed, and it was the first genuinely unguarded sound he'd heard from her. I have no idea. Someone who drinks bad wine and talks to strangers and doesn't have to be Claire Monroe for a few hours. Then don't be, Ethan said. She raised an eyebrow. Just like that? Just like that. For tonight, you're just Claire, not CEO Claire, not grieving daughter Claire. Just Claire who's had a really bad week and deserves a break. Samk? And who are you? Just Ethan, not marketing specialist Ethan. Not the guy whose girlfriend just left him. Just Ethan who makes questionable decisions and drinks whiskey in bars. Claire lifted her glass. 2 questionable decisions. Ethan clinked his glass against hers. To questionable decisions. They drank, and something in the air between them shifted. The formality dissolved. The hierarchy disappeared. For the first time all day, maybe all year, Ethan felt like he could breathe. Tell me something true, Claire said. About what? Anything. Something you don't usually tell people. Ethan turned his glass in his hands, watching the amber liquid catch the light. I'm terrified that I'm turning into my father. He worked himself to death. Literally. Heart attack at 52, right at his desk. Everyone said he was dedicated, hardworking, successful. But I was 12 when he died, and I barely knew him. He was always at the office, always chasing the next promotion, the next achievement. And now I look at my life and I see the same pattern. Different job, same obsession. Claire didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was soft. My father died 3 days ago. Heart attack. He was 68, retired for 5 years, and he finally had time to do all the things he'd put off. except he'd forgotten how to enjoy them. He spent his whole life building a company, and when he stepped away, he didn't know who he was anymore. She met Ethan's eyes. So I understand that fear more than you know. I'm sorry about your father. I'm sorry about yours. They sat with that for a moment. Two people bound by similar ghosts, similar fears. What would you do differently? Claire asked. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you say? Ethan considered it. I'd tell him that success isn't worth it if you're alone, that relationships matter more than promotions, that being present is more important than being perfect. He paused. What about you? I'd tell her that being strong doesn't mean being alone, that asking for help isn't weakness, that love is supposed to be a partnership, not a competition. Claire's expression was distant. But I don't think she would have listened. She was so determined to prove she could do it all herself. Are you still? I don't know. Yesterday I would have said yes. Tonight? She trailed off, shaking her head. Tonight I'm sitting in a bar with an employee, having the most honest conversation I've had in years. So maybe I'm changing. Is that allowed? Ethan asked with a slight smile. CEO's changing? Probably not. There's likely a clause in my contract forbidding human vulnerability. But she was smiling too, and Ethan realized it transformed her face completely. The tired executive disappeared, replaced by someone younger, lighter, more alive. Tell me something else, he said. Like what? Something that would surprise me. Something that doesn't fit the CEO image. Claire thought for a moment. I wanted to be a teacher, before business school, before Apex, before any of this. I wanted to teach high school English and help kids fall in love with books the way I had. She laughed softly. My father talked me out of it, said I was too smart to waste my potential on teaching, convinced me that business was where I could make a real impact. Do you regret it? Sometimes. Mostly, I wonder who I would have been if I'd made different choices. Do you ever do that? Imagine the alternate versions of yourself? All the time, Ethan admitted. There's a version of me who's a photographer. I used to take pictures constantly in college. Street photography, portraits, landscapes. I was pretty good. But it didn't seem practical, didn't fit the career trajectory everyone expected. So I packed away my camera and got an MBA. Do you still take pictures? No, haven't touched a camera in 6 years. Why not? Same reason you don't teach. Life got in the way. Practicality got in the way. Fear got in the way. Claire leaned forward. What if we stopped letting fear make our decisions? That's easier said than done when you've built your entire life around those fears. I know, but what if we tried? What if just for tonight we pretended we were the people we wanted to be instead of the people we've become? Ethan felt something stir in his chest. Excitement, possibility, danger. That sounds like a terrible idea. The best ones usually are. He shouldn't have agreed. He should have finished his drink, thanked her for the conversation, and gone home to his empty apartment. But sitting across from Claire, seeing the challenge in her eyes, feeling the connection that had formed between them so unexpectedly, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. Okay, he said. What do people who aren't afraid do on Tuesday nights? Claire signaled the waitress. They have another drink, and they stop checking their phones. Ethan put his phone face down on the table. Claire did the same. They ordered another round and then another. Conversation flowed like water, easy and natural. They talked about everything, books they'd loved, places they wanted to travel, embarrassing moments from their 20s, the small joys that got lost in busy lives. I miss baking, Claire said at some point during the third drink. I used to bake every Sunday, bread mostly. Something about the process, the kneading, the waiting, the smell filling the apartment. It was meditative. When did you stop? When Sunday became just another workday, when I started telling myself I didn't have time for things that didn't contribute to productivity. She shook her head. God, listen to me. I sound like a corporate robot. You sound like someone who forgot how to give herself permission to enjoy things. Is that what I'm doing? Forgetting? I think we both are, Ethan said. I think we've spent so long being what everyone expects that we've forgotten what we actually want. And what do you want, Ethan Brooks? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with more meaning than it should have had. Ethan looked at Claire. Really looked at her. saw the intelligence in her eyes, the vulnerability she was trying to hide, the loneliness that mirrored his own. He saw someone who had climbed to the top and discovered the view was emptier than she'd expected. Someone who was tired of being strong, tired of being alone, tired of pretending she had all the answers. He saw himself. "I want to feel something real," he said finally. "I want to stop sleepwalking through my life." "Then wake up," Claire said softly. "Is that what this is? Waking up?" "I don't know, but it feels like something." The bar had grown quieter around them. Other patrons had left, replaced by a different crowd, people finishing late shifts, nurses from the hospital down the street, night owls seeking company. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under streetlights. "I should go," Ethan said, but he made no move to stand. "You should," Claire agreed, but she didn't move either. "This is inappropriate." "Extremely. We work together. You work for me, technically, which makes it worse. So we should stop." "We should." Claire met his eyes. "But I don't want to." Ethan's heart was pounding. "Neither do I. This is a bad idea. Probably the worst. We could get in serious trouble." "We could?" Claire reached across the table and took his hand. Her touch was warm, certain, grounding. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Is this real? What we're feeling right now, is it real, or is it just two lonely people finding comfort because we've both had terrible weeks?" Ethan considered the question seriously. He thought about the way conversation had flowed between them, the easy honesty, the feeling of being seen for the first time in years. He thought about how Claire's smile made something in his chest loosen, how her vulnerability gave him permission to be vulnerable too. "I think it's both," he said. "I think we're both lonely, and we've both had terrible weeks. But I also think this," he gestured between them, "this is something I haven't felt in a long time, maybe ever." Claire squeezed his hand. "Me too. So what do we do about it?" "I don't know, nothing, probably. Go back to our lives tomorrow and pretend this never happened. You'll be the marketing specialist on the 3rd floor. I'll be the CEO you see in quarterly meetings. We'll be professional and appropriate, and we'll never speak of this night again." "Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out fierce, certain, "but I don't see how we can do anything else." Ethan turned her hand over, traced the lines of her palm with his thumb. "What if we didn't think about tomorrow? What if we just existed in this moment?" "That's not how life works." "Maybe it should be," Claire laughed, and there was something desperate in the sound. "You're asking me to be impulsive. I don't do impulsive. I plan. I strategize. I consider every possible outcome." "How's that working for you?" "Apparently not well, since I'm sitting in a bar holding hands with an employee and considering throwing away 15 years of careful professionalism." "You could let go of my hand," Ethan pointed out. "I could." But she didn't. They sat like that for another moment, hands linked across the table, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Then Claire stood up, still holding his hand. "Walk with me," she said. "Where?" "Nowhere. Everywhere. I don't care. I just need to move." Ethan paid the bill. She tried to argue. He insisted. And they left the bar together. The night air was cool and clean after the rain, the streets mostly empty. They walked without direction, hands still linked, not talking, just existing in the space they'd created. "I haven't done this in years," Claire said eventually. "Done what?" "Just walked. No destination, no purpose, just walking to walk." "How does it feel?" "Terrifying. Liberating. I can't decide which." They turned a corner and found themselves in front of a small park, the kind of neighborhood green space that existed in pockets throughout the city. Claire pulled him toward a bench overlooking a pond where streetlights reflected off the water. "Sit with me," she said. They sat. The city hummed around them, distant traffic, voices from nearby apartments, the rustle of wind through trees. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder and Ethan held very still, afraid that any movement might break whatever spell they were under. "I'm going to regret this tomorrow," Claire said quietly. "Probably." You're supposed to talk me out of it. I can't. I'm going to regret it too. She lifted her head to look at him. Then why are we doing it? Because sometimes the thing you'll regret is better than playing it safe. Claire searched his face, and Ethan let her look. Let her see everything he'd been hiding. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that this unexpected connection might mean something. If we do this, she started. We're not doing anything, Ethan interrupted gently. We're two people who met on a bad night and found something good. That's all. No promises, no expectations, just this. Just this, Claire repeated like she was testing the words. Is that enough? She kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was certain, hungry, the kiss of someone who'd been holding back for too long and had finally decided to let go. Ethan kissed her back with equal intensity, his hands in her hair, her body pressed against his, the world narrowing to just this moment, just this feeling. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Claire rested her forehead against his. That was inappropriate, she whispered. Extremely. We should stop. We should. But neither of them moved. They stayed there on the bench, wrapped around each other, stealing moments that didn't belong to them. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan felt fully, completely alive. The city's dawn came slowly, filtering through the gaps between buildings in shades of gray and gold. Ethan woke to the sound of his alarm with Claire's perfume still clinging to his jacket, the memory of her kiss still burning on his lips. They'd stayed on that bench until nearly 2 a.m, talking and kissing and pretending the world outside that park didn't exist. When they'd finally parted ways, she'd squeezed his hand one last time and said, "Tomorrow we go back to normal. Tonight never happened." He'd agreed because what else could he say? But lying in bed now, staring at the ceiling of his too-empty apartment, Ethan knew that nothing would ever be normal again. His phone buzzed. Emma, asking how the blind date went. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "Didn't show up. Long story. I'm fine." It wasn't a lie, exactly. Rachel hadn't shown up. And he was fine. Better than fine, actually, which was the problem. He shouldn't feel this good about something that could never happen again. Work started in 90 minutes. He showered, dressed in his usual business casual, and tried not to think about the fact that he'd be in the same building as Claire. Tried not to wonder if she'd regret last night, if she'd look at him with disappointment, or worse, pretend it never happened at all. The subway was crowded with the usual morning rush. Ethan stood pressed between a woman reading on her phone and a man who smelled like coffee and determination, and thought about parallel lives. There was a version of him who'd never walked into that bar, who'd waited for Rachel, who'd gone home alone and woken up to the same empty routine. That version of him would get to work today unchanged, unaffected, safe. This version of him felt like he was walking toward a cliff. Apex Marketing Solutions occupied floors 3 through 7 of a glass tower downtown. Ethan's desk was on 3, in an open floor plan with 40 other marketing specialists and coordinators. Claire's office was on 7, behind frosted glass and executive privilege. In the 2 years he'd worked here, he'd been to the 7th floor exactly 3 times. Once for orientation, once for the holiday party, once when his team's campaign won an industry award and Claire personally congratulated them. He'd never actually spoken to her before last night. Not really. A handshake at the holiday party, a thank you when she'd congratulated his team. That was it. She was a figure on a screen during quarterly addresses, a name on company-wide emails, a presence more felt than experienced. Now she was the woman who'd kissed him like she was drowning and he was air. Ethan stepped off the elevator on the 3rd floor and immediately ran into Marcus Chen, his closest friend at work and the team lead for digital campaigns. "You look terrible," Marcus said cheerfully. "Late night?" "Something like that." "The blind date Emma set up? How bad was it?" Ethan thought about how to answer that. "It didn't happen." "She stood you up? Man, that's rough." Marcus walked with him toward their desks. "You want to grab lunch later? We can get Thai food and you can tell me about your disaster of a love life." "Can't. I've got the Brennan presentation at noon and I'm not ready." It was a lie. The Brennan presentation had been ready for 3 days, but Ethan needed normal conversation to stop, needed to sit at his desk and focus on something that didn't involve Claire's smile or the way she'd looked at him when she'd said they should pretend it never happened. He made it through the morning on autopilot, answered emails, refined slide decks, joined a conference call where half the participants were clearly multitasking and not listening. Normal work, normal routine, everything exactly as it should be. At 11:30, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Coffee? The place on 5th. 15 minutes." His heart stopped. He knew that number now, even though they hadn't exchanged phones last night. She must have pulled his contact information from the company directory, which meant this wasn't a mistake, wasn't an accident. She'd made a deliberate choice to reach out. Ethan looked around the office. Marcus was on a call. Their supervisor was in a meeting. No one was paying attention to him. He could slip out, be back before anyone noticed. He shouldn't go. He should delete the text, focus on work, maintain the professional boundary they'd agreed to restore. Going would be risky, stupid, potentially career-ending if anyone saw them together and read too much into it. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. The coffee shop on 5th was a small, independent place 3 blocks from Apex's building, the kind of spot where freelancers camped out with laptops and students studied for exams. Ethan spotted Claire immediately, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups already waiting. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, looking every inch the powerful executive she was. But when he sat down across from her, he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. "I know we said we wouldn't do this," Claire said without preamble. "I know we agreed last night was a one-time thing, but I couldn't—" She stopped, started again. "I needed to see you. I'm glad you texted. Are you? Because I've been sitting here for 10 minutes convinced this was a massive mistake and you'd either not show up or show up and tell me we need to forget it happened." Ethan wrapped his hands around the coffee cup she'd ordered for him. Black, 2 sugars. She'd remembered from the bar. "I couldn't forget it if I tried." Claire's expression softened slightly. "Me neither." She glanced around the coffee shop, checking for familiar faces. "This is dangerous." "I know. If anyone from work sees us, I know. We should stop, right now, before this becomes something we can't take back." "Do you want to stop?" Ethan asked. Claire met his eyes, and he saw the answer there before she spoke. "No." They sat with that admission for a moment, the weight of it settling between them. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with ordinary life. Students debating philosophy, a mother trying to calm a fussy toddler, the hiss of the espresso machine. Normal people doing normal things, unaware that 2 strangers were making a decision that could upend everything. "I don't know how to do this," Claire said quietly. "I don't date employees. I don't get involved with people I work with. I have rules, boundaries, principles. And in less than 24 hours, you've made me want to break all of them." "I don't want to cost you your job," Ethan said, "or your reputation. If this is too risky, everything worth having is risky." She reached across the table and took his hand just for a second, then pulled back as a woman walked past their table. "I spent 8 years with someone who was never really there. I spent my whole life being careful, being strategic, making the smart choice. And where did it get me? Alone at my father's funeral, crying in a bar on a Tuesday night, watching my life pass by while I optimize quarterly projections. So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to be reckless. Just for a little while. I want to see where this goes, even knowing it's probably going to end badly." Ethan felt his heart hammering against his ribs. "We'd have to be careful. Very careful. No one at work could know." "Absolutely not. We keep it completely separate. If anyone found out—" "I know the risks," Claire interrupted. "I'm a CEO, Ethan. I calculate risk for a living. This is a bad bet by every metric, but I'm making it anyway." She stood up, gathering her coffee. "I have a board meeting in 20 minutes, but tonight—" She paused. "Do you know the Italian restaurant on 7th? Marcello's? I've heard of it." 8 o'clock. Make a reservation under your name. We'll say we ran into each other by accident if anyone asks." "Will anyone ask?" "Probably not, but we need a story just in case." She looked at him, and something fierce blazed in her expression. "I want to do this right. I want actual dates, real conversation, time to figure out if this is something or just 2 lonely people finding comfort. Can you give me that?" "Yes." Even knowing we have to hide it? Even knowing that. Claire nodded, then did something that nearly stopped his heart. She leaned down and kissed his cheek, quick and soft and devastating. 8 o'clock, she whispered. Then she was gone, walking out of the coffee shop like she owned the world, leaving Ethan sitting there with his heart racing and his mind spinning. He made it back to the office in a daze. The Brennan presentation went fine, though he couldn't remember a single slide afterward. The afternoon crawled by in a blur of emails and meetings that didn't matter. At 6:30, Ethan left the office and went home to change. His apartment felt different now. Jessica's absence was still there. Empty spaces where her things used to be, the silence where her voice used to fill rooms. But it didn't hurt the same way. Instead, Ethan found himself thinking about new possibilities. About what it might feel like to share this space with someone who actually wanted to be there, who chose him deliberately instead of settling. He showered, changed into dark jeans and a button-down shirt, and caught himself checking his reflection 3 times before leaving. He hadn't been nervous about a date since college. But this wasn't just a date. This was Claire. Brilliant, complicated, powerful Claire, who'd somehow decided he was worth the risk. Marcello's was exactly the kind of place Ethan expected. Dim lighting, white tablecloths, the smell of garlic and wine, and money. He gave his name to the hostess and was led to a corner table, partially hidden by a decorative screen. Private without being obvious. Claire had thought of everything. She arrived 10 minutes later and Ethan's breath caught. She'd changed out of her work suit into a simple black dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, softer, more like the woman he'd met in the bar and less like the CEO who terrified junior executives. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Traffic was terrible." "It's fine, I just got here." The lie was automatic, comfortable. They were already building a shared language of small deceptions, stories to tell the world while they figured out what they were to each other. A waiter appeared with menus and water. They ordered wine, a Chianti that Claire recommended, and Ethan watched her relax incrementally as the waiter left. Here, in this restaurant with no colleagues watching, she could let down her guard. "I thought about canceling all day," Claire admitted. "Convinced myself this was insane at least 6 different times." "But you didn't cancel." "No, I didn't." She took a sip of water. "Tell me something I don't know about you." "Like what?" "Anything. I want to know who you are when you're not being an employee or trying to impress me." Ethan thought about it. "I'm afraid of flying, absolutely terrified. I white-knuckle every takeoff and landing, and turbulence makes me want to cry." Claire smiled. "That's endearing." "Is it?" "Yes. It's real. What else?" "I talk to my sister every Sunday morning. We get coffee and walk around the park near her apartment, and she tells me about her week, and I pretend mine is more interesting than it is. She's my best friend and has been since we were kids. Our parents divorced when I was 8, and Emma and I learned to rely on each other." "Is she the one who set up the blind date?" "She is. She worries about me, thinks I work too much and don't have a life." "She's not wrong," Claire said gently. "No, she's not." Ethan paused as the waiter returned with their wine. After he left, Ethan continued. "What about you? Tell me something I don't know." "I hate business dinners, all of them. The small talk, the networking, the performance of caring about people I'll never see again. I spend half my life at those dinners, and I've hated every single one." "Then why do you go?" "Because that's what CEOs do. We smile, we network, we build relationships that benefit the company. It's part of the job." She swirled her wine. "But I'd rather be home with a book and a glass of wine, wearing sweatpants and not talking to anyone." "What are you reading right now?" "I'm not. I haven't read for pleasure in months. Every book I pick up is business-related, something that might give me an edge or teach me a new strategy." She shook her head. "I used to read novels constantly. Fiction was my escape. Now I don't even remember what that feels like." "What was the last novel you actually enjoyed?" Claire thought about it. 3 years ago. The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I cried at the end, and I don't cry, but that book," she paused, "it reminded me that human connection matters more than anything else, that survival isn't just about being strong, it's about the people you love and who love you back." "Do you have that? People who love you?" My mother. My sister, though we're not close. A few friends from college I barely see anymore. Claire met his eyes. Mostly I have colleagues who respect me and a company that depends on me. It's not the same thing. The waiter returned to take their order. Claire ordered the ossobuco, Ethan the carbonara. When they were alone again, Claire reached across the table and took his hand properly this time. No quick withdrawal, no checking to see who might be watching. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." "Why are you doing this? Really? You could date someone without all this complication. Someone who doesn't sign your paychecks and hold your career in her hands. Why take this risk?" Ethan looked at their joined hands, at the way her fingers fit between his like they'd been designed for it. "Because in one night, you made me feel more seen than Jessica did in 2 years. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm performing or pretending. I feel like I can just exist, exactly as I am, and that's enough." He paused. "And because I think you need someone who sees you too, not CEO Claire or grieving Claire or strategic Claire, just Claire." Her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "That's a lot to put on a second date." "Is this a second date? I thought last night was just two strangers drinking wine." "Last night was the prologue. Tonight's the first chapter." Claire squeezed his hand. "I want to be honest with you about something. I'm not good at this. Relationships, vulnerability, letting people in. I spent 8 years with David and I never let him see the parts of me I showed you in that bar. I don't know if I can do that consistently. I don't know if I can be the person you're hoping for. I'm not hoping for anything except honesty. If this doesn't work, if we try and it falls apart, at least we tried. At least we were real with each other." "Promise me something," Claire said. "What?" "Promise me that if this gets too complicated, if it starts to affect your work or put your career at risk, you'll tell me. I won't be the reason you lose opportunities or get passed over for promotions. If we have to end this to protect you, we end it. No arguments." "What about protecting you?" "I'm the CEO. The rules are different for me. If this comes out, I'll face the board and deal with the consequences. But you're younger, you're building your career, you have decades ahead of you. I won't let what we're doing derail that." "You're already thinking about how this ends," Ethan observed. "I'm thinking about how to do this responsibly. There's a difference." Their food arrived, and conversation shifted to safer topics: favorite restaurants, travel dreams, embarrassing first jobs. Claire told him about waiting tables in college and spilling an entire tray of drinks on a customer. Ethan told her about his brief stint as a telemarketer and how badly he'd failed at it. They laughed, and the tension that had been coiling between them relaxed into something warmer, easier. "I could get used to this," Claire said somewhere around dessert. "Used to what?" "This. Talking to someone who isn't trying to sell me something or get something from me. Just talking because they want to." "I want to," Ethan said. "More than you know." They left the restaurant near 10, stepping out into the cool night air. Claire's car was parked 2 blocks away. Ethan walked with her, their hands linked, stealing these moments of public intimacy before they had to separate again. "When can I see you again?" he asked as they reached her car. "Tomorrow's impossible. Back-to-back meetings until 7. Thursday?" "I have my sister's birthday dinner Thursday." "Friday then." "My place?" Claire pulled out her phone and texted him an address. 7 o'clock. "I'll cook." "You cook?" "I used to. I want to see if I still can." She unlocked her car but didn't get in. Instead, she turned to face him fully. "This is real, isn't it? It's not just me feeling something that isn't there?" "It's real," Ethan confirmed. "Terrifying and complicated and probably a disaster waiting to happen, but it's real." Claire kissed him then, and it was different from the desperate kiss in the park. This was slower, deeper, a promise instead of an escape. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I should go," she whispered. "You should." But they stood there for another moment, holding on to each other in the darkness, neither wanting to be the first to let go. Finally, Claire pulled back. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Claire." He watched her drive away, then walked back toward the subway with his head spinning and his heart full. His phone buzzed as he descended the station steps. Marcus, asking if he wanted to grab drinks. Ethan declined politely, citing exhaustion. and felt the weight of the lie even though it was a small one. This was going to be the hard part, he realized. Not the hiding, exactly, but the constant awareness of hiding, the split between his public life and his private one, the careful management of two separate realities that couldn't be allowed to touch. But when he got home and found a text from Claire waiting, just 3 words, "Thank you, tonight." Ethan knew he'd make that split work. He'd manage the complexity, navigate the risk, do whatever it took to keep this fragile, impossible thing alive. Friday came slowly. Work devoured Wednesday and Thursday with the kind of relentless urgency that made Ethan grateful for the distraction. The Brennan campaign got approved with minor revisions. Marcus pitched a new social media strategy that actually had potential. Their supervisor praised the team's Q4 numbers in a meeting where Ethan caught himself wondering if Claire had seen the same report, if she knew his name was attached to it. He saw her once, in the elevator on Thursday afternoon. She got on at 7. He was already inside, heading down. 2 other people were with them, someone from accounting, someone from HR. Claire nodded at him the way she'd nod at any employee, professional and distant. But when the others weren't looking, her eyes met his for just a second, and Ethan saw warmth there, recognition, shared secret. It was enough to carry him through the rest of the day. Thursday evening was Emma's birthday dinner at her favorite Thai restaurant. Ethan showed up with flowers and a cookbook she'd mentioned wanting and spent 3 hours with his sister and her friends pretending everything was normal. Emma cornered him near the end of the night while her friends were arguing about dessert. "You seem different," she said. "Different how?" "I don't know. Lighter, maybe. Less like you're carrying the weight of the world." She studied his face. "Did something happen? Did you meet someone?" Ethan's heart jumped. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you're smiling at your phone. You never smile at your phone. It's always just work emails and stress." Emma grinned. "So who is she? Did Rachel actually show up and you lied to me?" "It's not Rachel. But there is someone. Maybe it's new. I don't want to jinx it by talking about it." Emma hugged him. "Good. You deserve someone who makes you smile like that. Just promise me you'll actually let yourself be happy this time. Don't sabotage it by working yourself to death." "I promise." It was another lie, or at least an incomplete truth, because the person making him smile was the same person whose company demanded 60-hour weeks and constant availability. But Emma didn't need to know that. Not yet. Maybe not ever, depending on how this played out. Friday arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made it hard to concentrate. Ethan left work at 5:30, went home to shower and change, and caught himself checking the mirror more times than was reasonable. He bought flowers at a corner market. Roses felt too formal, so he chose a mixed bouquet of tulips and daisies, and took the subway to Claire's address. She lived in a high-rise in the financial district, the kind of building with a doorman and marble floors and artwork in the lobby that probably cost more than Ethan's yearly salary. He gave Claire's name to the doorman, who called up and then directed him to the elevator. 23rd floor, apartment 2304. Claire answered the door in jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, barefoot. She looked so different from the polished executive he was used to seeing that Ethan almost didn't recognize her. "You brought flowers," she said, taking the bouquet with a smile that made his chest tight. "I didn't know if I should. Is it too much?" "It's perfect." She stepped aside to let him in. "Come in. I'm attempting to remember how to cook, and it's going either very well or very badly. I can't tell which yet." Her apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sleek modern furniture, an open kitchen with professional-grade appliances. But what struck Ethan most was how impersonal it felt. No photographs on display, no clutter, no sign that anyone actually lived here beyond the basics. Claire caught him looking. "I know, it's sterile. David used to complain about it constantly, said it looked like a hotel room." "You could make it warmer," Ethan said carefully. "Personal touches. Things that matter to you." "I don't have things that matter to me. I have work and an apartment I sleep in." She set the flowers in a vase, arranging them with more care than the comment suggested. But maybe that should change. The kitchen smelled incredible. Garlic, herbs, something rich and savory. Claire had a pot simmering on the stove, a salad half prepared on the counter, and a bottle of wine already open. "What are we having?" Ethan asked. Coco vin, my grandmother's recipe. I haven't made it in 5 years, so we'll see if I remember how. She handed him a glass of wine. Make yourself comfortable. Tell me about your week. They fell into easy conversation while Claire cooked. Ethan told her about the Brennan campaign, about Marcus's new strategy, about the small victories and frustrations of work. She listened intently, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested, not just being polite. What about you? He asked. How was your week? Exhausting. The board wants to expand into the European market, which sounds great until you consider the logistics and cost. I spent 2 days in meetings arguing about projections and risk assessment. She stirred the pot, tasted the sauce, adjusted the seasoning. And I kept thinking about tonight, about getting to see you again. Did it help, thinking about tonight? More than it should have. She looked at him over her shoulder. Is it strange that I count the hours until I can stop being the CEO and just be Claire? Not strange. Human. They ate at her dining table, the city lights spreading out below them like a carpet of stars. The coco vin was perfect, rich and tender, the kind of comfort food that spoke of care and patience. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as naturally as it had in the bar, in the coffee shop, in the restaurant. No awkward pauses, no forced topics, just two people learning each other. After dinner, they moved to the couch with more wine. Claire tucked her feet under her and leaned against Ethan's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling the weight and warmth of her against him. I could fall asleep like this, she murmured. Then fall asleep. I'm supposed to be entertaining you. You are entertaining me. This is perfect. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city pulse below them. Then Claire spoke, her voice quiet. I'm scared, she said. Of what? That this is too good, that I'm going to ruin it somehow. I have a track record of choosing work over everything else, of letting relationships die from neglect. What if I do that to us? Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Then I'll call you on it. I'll remind you that this matters, that we matter. Promise? Promise. Claire lifted her head to look at him. Stay tonight. Not for... I just don't want you to leave yet. Stay. Okay. They stayed on the couch, talking until the conversation dissolved into comfortable silence, then into sleep. Ethan woke sometime around 3 a.m. to find Claire still curled against him, her breathing slow and steady. He carefully extracted himself, found a blanket, and covered her. She stirred, reached for him. Don't go, she mumbled, half asleep. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. He lay back down, and she immediately tucked herself against him again, her head on his chest, her arm across his waist. And lying there in the darkness, listening to her breathe, feeling more content than he had in years, Ethan understood that whatever complications lay ahead, whatever risks they were taking, this was worth it. She was worth it. When morning came, they woke tangled together on the couch, sunlight streaming through the windows. Claire blinked at him, momentarily disoriented, then smiled. Good morning, she said. Good morning. I drooled on your shirt. I'm mortified. I don't mind. She laughed and sat up, running her hands through her tangled hair. I must look terrible. You look perfect. Liar. But she was smiling, and there was something unguarded in her expression that made Ethan's heart ache. This was Claire without armor, without the careful polish she wore to face the world. This was the woman he was falling for. Coffee? She offered. Please. They moved through her kitchen together, an easy choreography of coffee making and toast preparing. Claire burned the first batch of toast and laughed at herself. Ethan found the jam in her refrigerator and the butter in a dish that looked like it had never been used. Ordinary domestic moments that felt extraordinary because they were shared. I have to go into the office this afternoon, Claire said over coffee. Weekend board prep. It's going to be brutal. Then I should let you work. I don't want you to go. She reached across the counter and took his hand. But I know you need to. We both have lives that exist outside of this. When can I see you again? Monday? Tuesday? I'll check my schedule and let you know. She paused. Is this sustainable? Seeing each other only when we can squeeze it in between work and obligations? We'll make it sustainable, Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. We'll figure it out. Claire nodded, but he could see the doubt in her eyes. The fear that they were trying to build something in the spaces between their real lives, and that eventually those spaces would close. But when she kissed him goodbye at the door, soft and lingering, Ethan chose to believe in possibility rather than probability, chose to believe that what they'd found was strong enough to survive the complexity they'd wrapped around it. He left her apartment and walked back out into the city, into his normal life, carrying the secret of them like a treasure he couldn't share. And for the first time since Jessica had left, Ethan felt like he was moving towards something instead of just away from his past. The pattern established itself over the next 6 weeks with the kind of careful choreography that became second nature. Coffee meetings that looked accidental. Lunch at restaurants far enough from the office that colleagues wouldn't stumble upon them. Evenings at Claire's apartment where they could be themselves without performance or pretense. Text messages sent after work hours, carefully worded to sound professional if anyone ever saw them. A double life that felt both exhilarating and exhausting. Ethan learned the geography of their secret, the coffee shop on 23rd that Claire loved for its anonymity, the Italian place in Brooklyn where no one from Apex ever ventured, the quiet park 3 blocks from her apartment where they could walk hand in hand after dark. He learned the rhythm of her schedule, the days when board meetings left her drained and needing silence, the mornings when she'd text him jokes about terrible PowerPoint presentations. He learned that she took her coffee black in the office, but with cream when she was home, that she hummed while she cooked, that she fell asleep within minutes of lying down but woke at the slightest sound. Claire learned him too. Learned that he stress-ate pretzels during deadline crunches, that he called his sister every Sunday without fail, that he had a weakness for old movies and could quote entire scenes from Casablanca. She learned to read his silences, to know when work stress was bleeding into their time together, to pull him back from the edge of overcommitment with a look or a touch. They were good at hiding, maybe too good. It was Marcus who first planted the seed of suspicion, though he didn't know it. They were at lunch on a Wednesday in late November, sitting in the cafeteria on the 3rd floor, when Marcus said, "Have you noticed Monroe's been different lately?" Ethan's heart jumped, but he kept his expression neutral. Different how? I don't know. Lighter, maybe? She actually smiled at me in the elevator yesterday. Claire Monroe. Smiled, without being prompted or forced. Marcus shook his head. I think she might be dating someone. She has that look. What look? You know, that glow people get when they're getting laid regularly and actually happy about it. Marcus grinned. Good for her, honestly. She's always seemed so untouchable. It's nice to think she's human. Ethan forced a laugh and changed the subject, but the comment stuck with him. Other people were noticing. If Marcus could see the difference in Claire, who else could? How long before someone connected the dots, before someone saw them together and recognized what they were to each other? He brought it up that night at Claire's apartment. She was cooking again. It had become their ritual, her teaching herself to remember recipes while he sat at the counter and talked about his day. Tonight, it was risotto, which required constant stirring and attention. Marcus said you seemed different, Ethan said carefully. Happier. Claire glanced at him, then back at the pot. I am happier. That's the problem. People are noticing. Let them notice. I'm allowed to be happy. But what if they figure out why? She stopped stirring and turned to face him fully. What are you saying? That I should go back to being miserable so no one suspects I'm dating someone? I'm saying we need to be more careful. We are careful. We don't see each other at work. We don't go anywhere near the office together. We text like professionals. What more do you want? I don't know. Ethan ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. Claire set down the spoon and came around the counter to stand in front of him. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Listen to me. I've spent my entire adult life making decisions based on what other people think. What's safe? What protects my career? And it left me alone, successful and completely empty. You make me feel full again. You make me remember why any of this matters. So if being happy with you means people notice, then let them notice. You say that now, but if the board finds out, the board can deal with it. I'm not doing anything illegal or unethical. We're two adults in a consensual relationship. Yes, there's a power dynamic we need to be mindful of, but we are being mindful. You don't get special treatment at work. I don't involve you in executive decisions. We keep our professional and personal lives separate. Do we, though? Ethan challenged. Because I think about you constantly at work. I see your name on emails and my heart jumps. I pass your floor on the elevator and wonder if you're in your office. That's not separate. That's bleeding together. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she kissed him softly. You're right. It is bleeding together. But I don't know how to stop it. I don't want to stop it. Neither do I, Ethan admitted. But I'm scared of what happens when it all comes crashing down. Then we'll deal with it together, you and me, whatever comes. The risotto burned while they stood there holding each other, and they ordered pizza instead, laughing about Claire's attempt at domestic perfection falling apart. But the conversation lingered in Ethan's mind like a warning he couldn't shake. The warning proved prescient 2 weeks later when everything began to unravel. It started with an email. Ethan was at his desk on a gray December morning, working through campaign analytics, when the message appeared in his inbox. The sender was listed as anonymous, but the subject line made his blood run cold. Inappropriate relationship, formal complaint. He opened it with shaking hands. To whom it may concern. I am writing to report a serious breach of company policy involving CEO Claire Monroe and marketing specialist Ethan Brooks. These two individuals are engaged in a romantic relationship that creates a significant conflict of interest and potential favoritism in the workplace. This relationship violates Apex's ethics policy regarding relationships between executives and subordinate employees. I'm requesting a formal investigation into this matter and appropriate disciplinary action. Evidence of this relationship includes multiple sightings of Monroe and Brooks together outside of work hours at restaurants and coffee shops, as well as observable changes in Monroe's demeanor and decision-making since the relationship began. This complaint is filed in the interest of maintaining professional standards and fairness for all Apex employees. Ethan read it 3 times, his heart pounding harder with each pass. Someone knew. Someone had been watching them. Someone had filed an official complaint that would now go to HR, to the board, potentially to everyone. His phone buzzed. Claire. My office. Now. He took the elevator to 7 in a daze, barely aware of the other people around him. Claire's assistant waved him through without comment, and he found Claire standing at her window, her back to the door, her posture rigid. Close the door, she said without turning around. He did. You got the email. The entire board got the email. HR got it. The legal department got it. She finally turned to face him, and Ethan saw fury in her expression mixed with something that looked like fear. Someone's trying to destroy us. Do you know who? I have a suspicion. She pulled up something on her computer and turned the screen toward him. It was a news article from 3 days ago. David Chen named partner at prestigious marketing firm. The photo showed a handsome man in his 40s smiling confidently at the camera. Your ex, Ethan said. My ex, who I broke up with 2 months ago. My ex who's been calling me weekly trying to get me to reconsider. My ex who I finally told very clearly that I'd moved on and was seeing someone else. Claire's voice was tight with anger. He asked who. I didn't tell him, but David has connections everywhere in this industry. He could have had someone watching me. So what do? We tell the truth. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They want to hear from both of us. She moved away from the window and sat down heavily in her chair. This could end my career, Ethan. The optics alone. A CEO dating a subordinate employee. It doesn't matter that we've been careful or that there's no actual favoritism. The perception is enough. Then we end it, Ethan said, the words tasting like ash. We tell them it's over. We say it was a mistake, and it won't happen again. Is that what you want? No, but I won't let you lose everything because of me. Claire stood up and walked over to him. She took his hands in hers, held them tight. I need you to understand something. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the board decides, I don't regret this. I don't regret you. For the first time in years, I felt like my life was mine instead of just a series of obligations and performances. You gave me that. Claire, let me finish. If they force me to choose between you and this job, I need to think about what I actually want, because maybe, she paused, took a shaky breath. Maybe this is the universe telling me it's time for a change anyway. Don't throw away your career for me, please. I'm not throwing it away. I'm choosing what matters. She kissed him, and it felt like goodbye. Go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Ethan left her office feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He made it through the rest of the workday on autopilot, deflecting Marcus's questions about why he looked so pale, ignoring the curious glances from colleagues who must have heard rumors by now. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. Best case, the board accepted their explanation and issued a warning. Worst case, Claire lost her position and Ethan got fired. Middle case, they were forced to end the relationship under threat of termination. All the cases felt like losing. His phone rang at 2 a.m. Emma. Why is there an article online about Claire Monroe and some scandal? She demanded without preamble. And why do I have a terrible feeling you're involved? Ethan closed his eyes. How did you find out? Someone from your office posted something vague on social media, and I went digging. Ethan, please tell me you're not dating your boss. She's not my direct boss. There are 3 levels between us. Oh my God, you are dating her. Are you insane? Do you know what this could do to your career? I know exactly what it could do. I'm living it right now. Emma was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Is she worth it? Really worth it? Ethan thought about Claire's laugh, the way she looked at him like he mattered, the feeling of coming home that happened every time they were together. Yes, he said, she's worth it. Then fight for her. Whatever happens tomorrow, you fight. What if fighting means she loses everything? What if not fighting means you both lose everything? Emma countered. Look, I don't know this woman, but I know you, and I know you don't take risks like this unless something is real, so trust that it's real and fight for it. They talked for another hour, Emma asking questions and Ethan answering as honestly as he could. When they finally hung up, he felt marginally better. At least someone in his life knew the truth now. At least he didn't have to carry this completely alone. Morning came too fast. Ethan dressed in his best suit, the one he saved for important presentations, and took the subway to work an hour early. The office was nearly empty when he arrived. He sat at his desk trying to focus on emails he couldn't process, jumping every time someone walked past. At 9:45, his phone buzzed. Claire. Conference room A, 10th floor, now. He took the elevator up, his heart hammering. The conference room was large and intimidating, dominated by a long table where 5 board members already sat. Claire was at the head of the table, her expression professionally neutral. She gestured to the chair beside her. Mr. Brooks, thank you for joining us, said a woman Ethan recognized as Patricia Halloway, the board chair. We're here to discuss the complaint that was filed regarding your relationship with Ms. Monroe. I understand, Ethan managed. Let's start with the basics. Are you and Ms. Monroe involved in a romantic relationship? Ethan looked at Claire. She gave him a slight nod. Yes, he said. We are. How long has this relationship been ongoing? Approximately 2 months? Patricia made a note. And Ms. Monroe, were you aware that such relationships violate company policy regarding executive employee fraternization? I was aware, Claire said calmly. I was also aware that the policy applies specifically to direct reporting relationships, which this is not. Mr. Brooks doesn't report to me. He reports to his team supervisor, who reports to the marketing director, who reports to the VP of marketing. There are 3 levels of management between us. The spirit of the policy is clear even if the letter allows for interpretation, said another board member, an older man named Gerald. The power imbalance is undeniable. I don't deny the power imbalance, Claire said, but I do deny that it's resulted in any favoritism or inappropriate conduct. Mr. Brooks has received no special treatment. His recent promotion was based solely on merit and was decided by his direct supervisor, not by me. His project assignments come through normal channels. I've been scrupulous about maintaining professional boundaries at work. Yet you've been conducting this relationship in secret, Patricia said, which suggests you knew it was inappropriate. We've been private, not secretive, Claire corrected. There's a difference. We didn't broadcast our relationship because it's personal, not because it's wrong. Gerald leaned forward. Ms. Monroe, you've been an exemplary CEO for 7 years. Your leadership has taken this company to new heights, but this situation puts us in an impossible position. The optics alone could damage investor confidence and employee morale. I understand your concerns, Claire said, but I'm not going to apologize for being in a relationship with someone who makes me happy. We've been careful, ethical, and professional. If the board feels that's not enough, then I'll accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate. Patricia turned to Ethan. Mr. Brooks, do you have anything to add? Ethan's mouth was dry. This was the moment. He could minimize, apologize, distance himself, or he could tell the truth. I love her, he said, and the words landed in the room like stones in still water. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know it complicates things, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is just some casual thing we can walk away from. Claire is the most remarkable person I've ever met. And yes, the power dynamic is complicated, but we've handled it responsibly. I haven't received any preferential treatment. I haven't asked for any. Our relationship exists completely outside of work. Except that it doesn't, Gerald said. You work for this company. She runs this company. There is no outside of work when those are the facts. Then fire me, Ethan said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. If my employment here is the problem, then I'll resign. But don't punish Claire for this. She's done nothing wrong. Mr. Brooks? Patricia started. I mean it. I'll submit my resignation today. Claire can continue leading this company the way she has been. Problem solved. That's not... Claire began, but Ethan cut her off. It is a solution. You want to protect the company's reputation? This does it. The subordinate employee removes himself from the equation. The relationship isn't a workplace issue anymore. Patricia and Gerald exchanged glances. Can you excuse us for a moment? Patricia said. We need to discuss this privately. Ethan and Claire stepped out into the hallway. The moment the conference room door closed, Claire grabbed his arm. You can't resign, she said urgently. That's not what I want. It might be the only option. No, we find another way. There is no other way, Claire. They're going to force you to choose, and I won't let you choose wrong. Before Claire could respond, the conference room door opened. Patricia beckoned them back inside. They sat down, and Ethan braced himself for whatever was coming. We've discussed the situation, Patricia said, and we've decided to table any immediate decisions pending a full investigation. Investigation into what? Claire asked. Into the allegations made in the complaint. Specifically, we need to verify whether there has been any favoritism or inappropriate use of company resources. Patricia's expression was grave. This investigation will be conducted by our external legal counsel and should take approximately 2 weeks. During that time, both of you will be expected to maintain professional conduct and avoid any actions that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. Are we being suspended? Ethan asked. No. You'll both continue your normal duties, but understand that we're taking this seriously. Patricia paused. There's one more thing. The complaint mentioned evidence, specifically photographs and documentation of you two together. Our legal team will need to review all of that as part of the investigation. Claire's jaw tightened. So David is trying to destroy us with surveillance evidence. We don't know who filed the complaint, Patricia said. It was anonymous. It was David Chen, Claire said flatly. My ex-boyfriend who's been harassing me since I ended our relationship. He knew about Ethan, and this is retaliation. Gerald frowned. Do you have proof of that? I have dozens of phone calls and text messages where he's been trying to convince me to get back together. I have a voicemail from last week where he threatened to make me regret my decision. I'd be happy to provide all of that to your investigators. Patricia made another note. Please do. If this complaint is coming from a place of personal vendetta rather than legitimate workplace concern, that changes things significantly. The meeting ended with more warnings and procedural explanations. Ethan left feeling like he'd survived a battle, but the war was just beginning. He and Claire rode the elevator down together in silence, hyper-aware of the camera in the corner, the potential witnesses on every floor. When they reached the 3rd floor where Ethan needed to get off, Claire caught his hand for just a second. We're going to be okay, she whispered. Promise? I promise. Whatever it takes. Ethan stepped off the elevator and walked back to his desk, where Marcus was waiting with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity on his face. "So," Marcus said quietly, "you and Monroe. I mean, I had my suspicions after what I said the other day, but I didn't actually think—" "It's complicated," Ethan said. "Clearly. You okay?" "Ask me in 2 weeks." "Fair enough." Marcus hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think she's lucky. You're a good guy, Brooks. If anyone could handle dating the CEO, it's you." It was a small kindness, but Ethan held on to it like a lifeline. If Marcus could see it that way, maybe others would too. Maybe this wouldn't end in complete disaster. That evening, Claire came to his apartment for the first time. She'd always insisted on her place. More privacy, better security, less chance of neighbors recognizing her. But tonight she texted him saying she needed to see where he lived, needed to understand his world the way he understood hers. Ethan's apartment was small and modest, a one-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades. He'd cleaned frantically after work, trying to make it presentable, but it still felt inadequate compared to Claire's sleek high-rise. She walked in and immediately went to the bookshelf, scanning titles. "You still have your photography books," she observed. "Yeah, couldn't quite bring myself to get rid of them." She pulled one out, flipped through it. "These are beautiful. Why did you really stop?" Ethan sat down on the couch, exhausted from the day. Fear, mostly. Fear that I wasn't good enough. Fear that I'd fail. Fear that choosing art over business would disappoint everyone. Claire set the book down and came to sit beside him. "What if we stopped being afraid together?" "What does that mean?" "It means maybe this investigation, as terrible as it is, might actually be an opportunity. A chance to step back and figure out what we really want, instead of just reacting to what other people expect. You're not seriously considering leaving Apex." "I'm considering everything. I've given that company 15 years of my life. I've sacrificed relationships, health, personal happiness. And for what? A title and a salary and the respect of people I'm not sure I even like." She took his hand. "What if there's something else out there? Something better?" "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but I want to find out. With you." She kissed him softly. "These past 2 months have been the happiest I've been in years. That has to mean something. It means we're good together. It doesn't mean you should throw away your career. Maybe I'm not throwing it away. Maybe I'm choosing something better." They talked late into the night, exploring possibilities that ranged from practical to fantastical. What if Claire started her own consulting firm? What if Ethan went back to photography? What if they both walked away from corporate life and built something new together? It was dreaming, mostly. But it felt good to dream. To imagine a future that wasn't dictated by fear or obligation, but by genuine choice. The next 2 weeks were excruciating. The investigation proceeded with clinical efficiency. Lawyers interviewed colleagues, reviewed email records, examined every project Ethan had worked on to determine if he'd received preferential treatment. Claire provided her evidence of David's harassment, including voicemails where he'd explicitly threatened to ruin her if she didn't come back to him. The whole office knew by now. Ethan felt eyes on him everywhere he went. Some looks were sympathetic, others judgmental, most just curious. Marcus ran interference when he could, shutting down gossip and redirecting conversations. Emma called every night to check on him. Claire was handling it with the same professional grace she brought to everything, but Ethan could see the toll it was taking. She looked tired, thinner, the light that had returned to her eyes over the past 2 months dimming under the pressure. They didn't see each other outside of work during the investigation. It felt too risky, too much like giving ammunition to anyone looking for reasons to condemn them. Instead, they texted late at night, messages that were part strategy and part comfort. "Missing you," Claire wrote one night. "Missing you too. How much longer?" Legal said 3 more days. Then the board meets to review findings. And then? And then we find out if we get to keep fighting or if this is the end. But it wasn't David who delivered the final blow. It was evidence that appeared 3 days before the board's final meeting, screenshots and photos that someone had clearly been collecting for weeks. Claire and Ethan at the coffee shop, walking hand in hand in the park, kissing outside her apartment building. Each image was dated and time-stamped, a comprehensive dossier of their relationship. The source was finally revealed when David's lawyer sent a letter to Apex's legal team. He'd hired a private investigator to follow Claire after their breakup, ostensibly to determine if she was seeing someone else. The investigator had documented everything, and David had held on to it, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. What he hadn't counted on was that hiring someone to stalk and photograph his ex-girlfriend was itself illegal. The lawyers pointed this out immediately, noting that any evidence obtained through illegal surveillance would be inadmissible and potentially actionable. David had overplayed his hand. When the board convened for their final meeting, Ethan and Claire sat together at that same conference table, but this time Patricia was smiling. "We've completed our investigation," she said, "and we've found no evidence of favoritism, inappropriate use of company resources, or policy violations beyond the letter of the fraternization guidelines. Furthermore, we've determined that the complaint was filed in bad faith by an individual engaged in illegal harassment of Ms. Monroe." Ethan felt something in his chest unclench. "However," Patricia continued, "we do need to address the relationship itself. While we found no wrongdoing, the appearance of impropriety is something we can't ignore. So we're proposing a solution." She slid a document across the table to Claire. "We'd like to restructure your reporting lines, Mr. Brooks, so that you report directly to the VP of Marketing rather than through the usual chain. This creates more clear separation between you and Miss Monroe in terms of organizational hierarchy." "That's acceptable," Ethan said immediately. "Additionally," Patricia said, looking at Claire, "we'd like you to formally disclose the relationship to HR and sign an acknowledgement that you'll recuse yourself from any decisions directly affecting Mr. Brooks's employment." "Also acceptable," Claire said. "Then we consider this matter closed. David Chen's harassment will be addressed through legal channels, and we'll be pursuing all available remedies." Patricia smiled genuinely now. "I'll be honest, when this first came to light, I was prepared to recommend termination for one or both of you. But the investigation revealed something I didn't expect. You really have kept this relationship separate from work. You haven't bent rules or used position for personal gain. You've just been two people trying to be happy together while maintaining professional standards." "Thank you," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't thank me yet. You're both going to be under scrutiny for a while. Colleagues will be watching, looking for any sign of favoritism or impropriety. You'll need to be beyond reproach." "We can do that," Ethan said. "I believe you can." Patricia stood, extending her hand. "Welcome to the most complicated relationship in corporate America." They shook hands, signed the documents, and left the conference room together. In the elevator, alone for the first time in 2 weeks, Claire turned to Ethan and smiled. "We won," she said. "We survived," he corrected. "Same thing." She kissed him, not caring about the camera, not caring who might see. "Take me home." "Yours or mine?" "Ours," she said. "We'll figure out whose place later. Right now I just need to be with you." They went to her apartment because it was closer, and because Ethan's landlord would probably object to Claire moving in without notice. They celebrated with wine and takeout, and the kind of relieved laughter that comes after surviving something terrible. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were learning each other all over again after weeks of forced separation. And lying in Claire's bed afterward, watching the city lights flicker through her windows, Ethan understood that they'd crossed a threshold. This wasn't a secret anymore. It was real, public, acknowledged. They'd fought for it and won. The hard part was over. Except it wasn't. Because surviving the investigation was just the beginning of learning how to live their relationship in public view. The whispers started immediately. Ethan would walk into the break room and conversations would stop mid-sentence. Colleagues who'd been friendly before now kept their distance, as if associating with him might somehow taint them by proximity. Marcus remained loyal, but even he admitted that people were talking, speculating about how Ethan had really gotten his position, whether Claire had been showing him favoritism all along despite what the investigation found. "They're jealous," Marcus said one afternoon over coffee. "You're dating the CEO. Half the building would kill for that kind of access." "It's not about access," Ethan protested. "It's about Claire. The person, not the position." "I know that. You know that. But people see what they want to see." Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "Just keep your head down and do good work." Eventually, the gossip will die and something else will become the office scandal. But keeping his head down proved harder than expected when every decision felt weighted with scrutiny. A campaign Ethan proposed got approved, and immediately he heard murmurs that Claire must have pushed it through. Never mind that the approval came from the VP of Marketing, not Claire. Never mind that the campaign had solid metrics backing it up. The perception was enough to poison the victory. Claire was dealing with her own challenges. Two board members who'd initially supported keeping her as CEO were now questioning whether the relationship was too much of a distraction. Investors were asking questions. Industry publications were running barely veiled gossip pieces about corporate romances gone public without naming names but making it obvious who they meant. "I knew it would be hard," Claire said one evening as they cooked dinner together at her apartment. "I just didn't realize how exhausting it would be to constantly defend something that should be simple." "Maybe we should cool things down," Ethan suggested, though the words felt wrong even as he said them. "Not break up, just be more private again. Let things settle." Claire stopped chopping vegetables and looked at him. "Is that what you want?" "I want you to stop looking so tired all the time. I want you to stop fighting battles because of me. I'm fighting battles because people are small-minded and can't imagine that a CEO might actually have a personal life. That's not on you." She set down the knife and came around the counter. "I won't hide us again. We did that, and it nearly destroyed us when David exposed it. If we're going to be together, we're together, publicly, proudly, without apology. Even if it costs you the company? Even then." But he could see the fear in her eyes that contradicted the certainty in her voice. The real test came 3 weeks after the board's decision, when Claire's mother invited them both to dinner. Catherine Monroe was a formidable woman in her late 60s, a former corporate attorney who'd built her own practice before retiring. She lived in a brownstone in the historic district, surrounded by art and books, and the kind of old money that whispered rather than shouted. Ethan was terrified. "She's going to hate me," he said as they drove to Catherine's house. "I'm the employee who's dating her daughter and causing professional chaos. She's going to take one look at me and decide I'm not good enough." "She's going to love you," Claire said with more confidence than the situation warranted. "She wants me to be happy. You make me happy. Therefore, she'll love you. It's basic logic." "Your mother's a lawyer. Lawyers don't operate on basic logic." Claire laughed and squeezed his hand. "Just be yourself. That's all she needs to see." Catherine answered the door herself, a tall, elegant woman with Claire's eyes and a smile that could have meant anything. "You must be Ethan," she said, taking his hand in a grip that was surprisingly strong. "Come in. I've heard quite a bit about you." "All good things, I hope," Ethan managed. "Some good, some concerning, all very interesting." Catherine led them into a living room that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Claire tells me you work in marketing. What made you choose that field?" And so began an interrogation disguised as polite dinner conversation. Catherine asked about his background, his education, his career goals, his family. She asked about how he and Claire met, conveniently leaving out the blind date setup and focusing on a chance encounter at a bar. She asked what his intentions were, using exactly those old-fashioned words, and Ethan appreciated the directness, even as it made him squirm. "I love your daughter," he said finally, deciding honesty was the only path forward. "I know the circumstances are complicated. I know the age difference and the professional dynamic make people uncomfortable, but I love her, and I'm committed to making this work despite the complications." Catherine studied him for a long moment. "You're younger than I expected." "I'm 28. Claire is 36. That's a significant gap at your ages." "It is," Ethan agreed, "but it doesn't feel significant when we're together. We want the same things. We value the same things." "Do you?" Catherine turned to Claire. "What do you want, darling? Really want, not what you think you should want." Claire set down her wine glass. "I want to build a life that's mine, not one dictated by professional expectations or fear of what people think. I want someone who sees me as Claire, not as CEO Monroe. I want what Dad never gave you, a partner who shows up, who's present, who chooses the relationship over everything else." Something softened in Catherine's expression. "Your father loved me in his way. But you're right. He was never fully present." She looked back at Ethan. "Can you promise my daughter that? That you'll show up, even when it's hard?" "I can promise I'll try. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll keep trying. Catherine nodded slowly. That's more honest than most men would be. She stood and gestured toward the dining room. Come. Dinner's ready, and I want to hear more about this investigation I've been reading about in the business press. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant once the initial interrogation ended. Catherine told stories about Claire's childhood, about the daughter who'd been reading annual reports at 12 and negotiating her allowance like a corporate deal at 14. Claire blushed and protested, but Ethan could see the love between mother and daughter, the respect that ran both ways. She called me every day after your father's funeral, Catherine said to Ethan, sometimes just to sit on the phone in silence. I always knew when she needed something versus when she just needed presence. After David didn't show up to the service, I thought she'd finally learned that lesson about choosing better partners. She smiled at Claire. I'm glad she did. On the drive home, Claire was quiet. Ethan reached over and took her hand. That went better than expected, he said. She liked you. My mother never admits it directly, but I could tell. How could you tell? She offered you her late father's scotch. She only does that for people she respects. Ethan thought back to the after-dinner drink Catherine had poured him, explaining it was a 60-year-old bottle her father had brought back from Scotland. He'd been too nervous to fully appreciate it at the time. I should have savored it more. You'll have other chances. She'll want to see you again. Claire pulled his hand to her lips and kissed it. Thank you for doing that. I know meeting parents is terrifying. It was, but I'd do it again. He paused. Should I be meeting your sister too? Claire's expression closed slightly. My sister and I aren't close. She lives in Boston. We talk maybe 3 times a year. She's married with 2 kids and thinks my life is a cautionary tale about ambition. What's her name? Rachel. She's a pediatrician. Everything our parents wanted in a daughter. Married, young, stable career, grandchildren. I'm the disappointment by comparison. I doubt your mother sees it that way. Maybe not anymore, but for a long time I think she did. I think she worried I'd end up alone and successful, which in her generation meant failed. Claire looked out the window at the passing city. I worried about that too, that I'd hit 40 and realize I'd traded everything personal for professional achievement. You're 36, not 40, and you're not alone. No, I'm not. She turned back to him. I want you to meet my team, properly, not as an employee, but as the person I'm dating. I want them to see us together, understand that this is real and serious. Is that wise? Given everything that just happened? Probably not, but I'm tired of treating you like a secret shame. You're not. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years, and I want people to know that. The team dinner happened the following week at an upscale restaurant Claire's executive assistant had recommended. Her leadership team consisted of 6 people: the VP of Marketing, the CFO, the COO, the head of HR, the general counsel, and the chief technology officer. All of them older than Ethan. All of them successful and intimidating in their own right. Claire introduced him simply. This is Ethan Brooks. Most of you know him as a marketing specialist on the 3rd floor. What you might not know is that he's also the person I'm dating. I wanted you all to meet him properly, outside of the professional context. The table went silent for a beat too long. Then Jennifer Wu, the CFO, raised her glass. To Claire finding someone who makes her smile in meetings. We were getting worried. The others laughed and raised their glasses, and the tension broke. Dinner proceeded with surprising normalcy. They talked about industry trends, upcoming projects, the challenges of scaling operations. Ethan contributed where he could, careful not to overreach but not wanting to be silent either. The VP of Marketing, a sharp woman named Sandra Torres, cornered him near the end of the evening. I approved your last 3 campaigns, she said without preamble. They were approved because they were good, not because of who you're dating. I want you to know that. I appreciate you saying that. But you should also know that people will always wonder. You could be the best marketer in the company, and someone will attribute it to your relationship with Claire. That's the reality you've signed up for. I know. Do you? Because it's one thing to know it intellectually, and another to live with it every single day. To have every success questioned and every failure magnified. Sandra's expression wasn't unkind, just brutally honest. I like Claire. She's the best CEO I've ever worked with. And I can see she cares about you. But this relationship has a price, and you're both going to keep paying it for as long as you're together and working at the same company. So what would you do? If it were me, I'd leave. Find another company. Build my career somewhere else. Remove the complication. Let the relationship exist outside of corporate politics. Sandra took a sip of her wine. But that's easy for me to say. I'm not the one in love. The conversation stuck with Ethan like a splinter. He didn't mention it to Claire that night, but it gnawed at him during the following days. Was Sandra right? Would leaving Apex solve the problem, or would it just create new ones? Would people assume he'd been pushed out? Would Claire resent him for making her choose between her company and their relationship? He was still wrestling with it when Emma invited them both to Sunday brunch. Claire had met Emma briefly once before, a quick coffee where Emma had interrogated Claire with the same protective intensity Catherine had shown. Now Emma wanted a real introduction, complete with her husband Michael and their apartment that smelled like cinnamon rolls and coffee. "I like her," Emma announced to Ethan, while Claire was in the bathroom and Michael was flipping pancakes. "She's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know, someone more corporate, more cold, but she looks at you like you hung the moon, and that makes her okay in my book." Emma paused. "Are you happy? Really happy?" "I am, but it's complicated. Love always is. The question is whether the complications are worth it." "They are," Ethan said with certainty. "She's worth it." Claire emerged from the bathroom and immediately got recruited by Michael to help with pancakes, and Ethan watched them interact with something warm spreading in his chest. This was what normal looked like. Sunday brunch with family, easy conversation, shared laughter. This was the life he wanted, the one that felt real and sustainable. That night, back at Claire's apartment, he brought up what had been bothering him. "Sandra said I should leave Apex," he said as they got ready for bed. "That as long as we're working at the same company, people will question everything about my career." Claire paused in brushing her hair. "What do you think?" "I think she might be right. But I also think leaving feels like running away, like admitting that what we have is wrong." "It's not wrong, but it is complicated." Claire set down her brush and came to sit on the bed beside him. "I've been thinking about this too, about what it means long term. If you stay at Apex, you'll always be fighting that perception. Every promotion will be questioned. Every success will be attributed to me, not your talent. But if I leave, people will say you drove me out or that the relationship wasn't worth the professional cost. People will say things no matter what we do. The question is what we can live with." She took his hand. "I don't want to be the reason you can't build the career you deserve. If leaving Apex is what's best for you, then you should do it. We'll figure out the rest. And if I want to stay, then you stay, and we keep fighting the perception battle together." Ethan thought about it for a long moment. "I want to stay. Not because it's easy, but because leaving feels like letting them win. Like saying our relationship is something shameful that has to be hidden or ended or managed by physical separation." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He pulled her close. "We've survived the investigation, the gossip, your mother's interrogation, and your executive team's scrutiny. We can survive workplace politics." Claire kissed him softly. "Together." "Together," he agreed. The decision made, they settled into a new rhythm. Public but not performative. Present but not defensive. They attended company events together, Claire's hand on Ethan's arm, meeting curious stares with quiet dignity. They had lunch occasionally in the cafeteria where everyone could see them, refusing to hide but also not making a spectacle. Gradually, imperceptibly, the whispers faded. Not completely. There would always be speculation, always be people who questioned the relationship's legitimacy. But the sharp edge of scandal dulled into simple office gossip, then into accepted reality. Claire and Ethan were together. The sky hadn't fallen. Work continued. Ethan's campaigns continued to perform well, and Sandra made a point of copying the entire leadership team when she praised his work, creating a paper trail that proved merit over favoritism. Claire recused herself from any discussions involving Ethan's department, sometimes leaving board meetings when his projects came up for review. They bent over backward to maintain ethical boundaries, and slowly it began to matter. 3 months after the investigation ended, Ethan got promoted to senior marketing specialist. The promotion came from Sandra with the board's approval, and Claire had abstained from the vote entirely. But the promotion meant more responsibility, better pay, and most importantly, validation that his work stood on its own. "I'm proud of you," Claire said when he told her the news. "You earned this." "We earned this. The fact that you've been so careful to keep boundaries made this possible." "No, your talent made this possible. I just didn't get in the way." They celebrated at the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first real date, coming full circle to where this had become real. Sitting across from her, watching candlelight dance in her eyes, Ethan felt the ground stabilize beneath him. This was working. Against all odds, despite every complication, they were building something sustainable. "I want to move in together," Claire said suddenly. Ethan nearly choked on his wine. "What?" "I want us to live together. Not you staying at my place or me visiting your apartment. I want a home that's ours." She reached across the table for his hand. "We've been doing this for almost 6 months now. We've survived an investigation and corporate gossip and family scrutiny. I think we can handle combining our furniture." "Your apartment is amazing, though. Why would you want to leave it?" "Because it's mine, not ours. I want something we choose together. Something that has both of our fingerprints on it." She paused. "Unless you're not ready. I don't want to push." "I'm ready," Ethan said, surprised to find it was completely true. "I'm absolutely ready." They spent the next month apartment hunting, looking at places that could accommodate both their needs, Claire's need for space and light, Ethan's desire for character and neighborhood charm. They compromised on a loft in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and tall windows, with enough room for a home office for Claire and a corner Ethan claimed for photography equipment he promised to actually use. Moving in together was chaos and joy in equal measure. Claire had accumulated 15 years of living alone, and Ethan had his own collection of possessions that didn't quite match her aesthetic. They argued about kitchen organization and bathroom counter space. They compromised on furniture placement and wall color. They learned each other's domestic habits, Claire's need for everything to have a designated place, Ethan's tendency to leave books scattered everywhere he'd been reading. But they also discovered the quiet pleasure of shared routines. Coffee together in the mornings before work, cooking dinner side by side in their new kitchen, falling asleep tangled together every night instead of only when their schedules aligned. The simple, ordinary intimacy of building a life together. Emma came over to see the new place and immediately declared it perfect. "You two are disgustingly happy," she said, but she was smiling. "It's gross and I love it." Catherine visited next, bringing a housewarming gift of expensive cookware and her late husband's vintage record collection. "Claire's father would have liked you," she told Ethan. "You have integrity. That mattered to him." Even Claire's sister Rachel made an appearance, flying down from Boston for a weekend visit. She was warmer than Ethan expected, less judgmental than Claire had implied. Over dinner, she admitted her own marriage had struggled in recent years. "Watching you two makes me remember what it's supposed to feel like," Rachel said. "That excitement of choosing someone every day, not just staying out of habit." She looked at Claire. "I'm sorry I've been distant. I think I was jealous of your freedom while feeling superior about my traditional choices. It was stupid." "We're both stupid in our own ways," Claire said, reaching across to squeeze her sister's hand. "But maybe we can be less stupid together." It felt like pieces falling into place, like a life assembling itself from fragments into something whole. Work stabilized. Family accepted them. Their relationship deepened from intensity into something more sustainable. Love that was built on daily choices rather than dramatic gestures. Then Claire's doctor called with results from her annual physical, and everything shifted again. She'd gone in for routine blood work, nothing concerning, but the doctor wanted her to come back in, wanted to run additional tests, used phrases like elevated markers and further investigation that made Claire's hand shake as she relayed the conversation to Ethan. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said, but her eyes betrayed her fear. The additional tests took a week where Claire tried to act normal, but Ethan could see the worry eating at her. He went with her to the follow-up appointment, sitting in the waiting room while she met with the doctor, watching minutes crawl by like hours. When she emerged, her face was carefully neutral. She walked past him without speaking, and Ethan's heart dropped. He followed her to the car, waited until they were both inside before asking, "What did they say?" Claire stared at the steering wheel. "I'm pregnant." Ethan's brain stuttered to a stop. "What?" "I'm pregnant, approximately 8 weeks." She turned to look at him, and he saw wonder and terror warring in her expression. "I'm 36 years old, I'm on birth control, and somehow I'm pregnant." "Is it?" He couldn't finish the sentence. "It's yours. Obviously it's yours. You're the only person I've been with in months." Her hand went to her stomach, protective instinct already kicking in. "I don't know how this happened. I've been taking my pill consistently. The doctor said sometimes it just fails, especially with stress, and..." She stopped, shook her head. "I'm pregnant. With your baby. And I have no idea what to do." Ethan reached for her hand, held it tight. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. I never planned for kids. My career always came first. I told myself there would be time later, but later kept getting pushed back. And now..." Her voice cracked. "Now I'm 36 and pregnant and terrified and somehow also kind of happy? Is that crazy? To be happy about something this unplanned?" "It's not crazy." Ethan's own emotions were a tangle he couldn't sort through yet. Fear, excitement, shock, joy. All of it mixing together into something overwhelming. "We'll figure it out. Whatever you want, whatever you need, we'll figure it out." Claire started crying then. Not delicate tears, but full sobs that shook her whole body. Ethan unbuckled both their seatbelts and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried out the fear and shock and unexpected joy of it all. "I want to keep it," she said finally, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I know it's terrible timing. I know it complicates everything even more. But I want this baby. I want our baby." "Then we'll have a baby," Ethan said, and felt certainty settle over him like a blanket. "We'll figure out the rest." They sat in the parking lot for another 20 minutes, holding each other, letting the reality sink in. They were going to be parents. In 7 months, their complicated, hard-won relationship would expand to include a child. The thought was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. "We should get married," Ethan said suddenly. Claire pulled back to look at him. "What?" "We should get married, not because you're pregnant, or not just because you're pregnant. Because I love you, and I want to build this life with you officially. I want to be your husband and this baby's father, and I want it all to be real and legal and permanent." "That's possibly the least romantic proposal in history," Claire said, but she was smiling through her tears. "I can do better. Give me time to get a ring and plan something proper." "I don't need proper. I need you." She kissed him, soft and certain. "Yes. Let's get married. Let's have a baby. Let's do this whole terrifying, beautiful thing together." They drove home in a daze, their joined hands resting on Claire's still flat stomach. The future had just rewritten itself completely, and neither of them knew exactly what it would look like. But they knew they'd face it together, and somehow that was enough. That night, lying in bed with Claire's head on his chest and his hand splayed protectively over where their child was growing, Ethan thought about the path that had led them here. A terrible day, a wrong assumption, a conversation that should never have happened, a relationship built in secrecy and defended in public, an investigation that almost destroyed them. And now this. New life growing from all that chaos and complication. "We're going to be okay," Claire whispered in the darkness. "Better than okay," Ethan replied. And lying there in the home they'd built together, facing a future neither had planned but both wanted, they believed it. The announcement came in stages, each one requiring its own careful choreography. They told Emma first, over Sunday brunch, 2 days after the doctor's appointment. Emma screamed so loud that Michael dropped an entire plate of bacon, and then she cried and hugged them both until Ethan couldn't breathe. "I'm going to be an aunt," she kept saying, like she couldn't quite believe it. "You're going to be a dad. Oh my God, you're going to be a dad." Catherine took the news with more composure but equal joy. "I'd given up on grandchildren from you," she told Claire over tea in her living room. "Rachel gave me 2, which was lovely, but I always hoped you'd have this too. That you'd find someone worth building a family with." She turned to Ethan. "You'll be a wonderful father, I can tell." "How can you tell?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "Because you showed up. You fought for my daughter when it would have been easier to walk away. You've proven you stay when things get difficult. That's what parenting is, staying when it's hard. Rachel flew down again when Claire called her with the news, this time bringing her 2 kids, a 7-year-old boy named Noah and a 5-year-old girl named Lily. The children were shy at first, clinging to their mother, but warmed up when Ethan got down on the floor to build blocks with them. They like you, Rachel observed, watching her son explain an elaborate block castle to Ethan. That's a good sign. Kids can tell when adults are faking interest. I'm not faking, Ethan said, carefully placing another block where Noah directed. This castle is serious business. Claire watched from the couch, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach, and something in her expression made Ethan's chest tight. She was already imagining it, their child playing with these cousins, family gatherings that included the next generation, a future that extended beyond just the 2 of them. The work announcement was trickier. They told Sandra first, in her office with the door closed, because she deserved to hear it directly rather than through rumors. Congratulations, Sandra said after a moment of visible surprise. I'm happy for you both, though I imagine this complicates the optics even further. We're getting married, Claire said, before the baby comes. We wanted you to know that this isn't just we're committed to each other and to building a family. I believe you, but the board might see it differently. They might think the pregnancy forced your hand, or worse, that you're creating a dynasty of sorts. Sandra's expression was sympathetic but realistic. I'll support you however I can, but you need to be prepared for pushback. The board meeting happened a week later. Claire insisted on announcing it herself, standing at the head of the conference table with Ethan beside her, facing the same people who judged their relationship 6 months earlier. I wanted to inform you all personally that Ethan and I are expecting a child in March, Claire said with the same professional composure she brought to quarterly projections. We're also planning to get married in January. I understand this may raise questions about my commitment to Apex, so I want to address that directly. I have no intention of stepping down or reducing my role. I'll take standard maternity leave and return to full duties afterward. My personal life doesn't diminish my professional capabilities. Patricia Holloway was the first to respond. Claire, no one's questioning your capabilities, but we do need to discuss the practicalities. A CEO with a newborn, especially a first-time mother in her late 30s, faces unique challenges. Have you considered what support structures you'll need? We're working on that. Ethan and I are looking into childcare options, and my mother has offered to help. We'll make it work. Gerald, the board member who'd been most skeptical during the investigation, leaned forward. What about succession planning? If something were to happen, or if you decided motherhood required different priorities, I've been CEO for 7 years without succession planning beyond standard protocols, Claire interrupted. Having a child doesn't change my ability to lead this company. If anything, it demonstrates better work-life integration, which is something Apex has been trying to promote for all employees. The meeting continued with more questions, more concerns carefully wrapped in congratulations. But by the end, the board had agreed to support Claire through her pregnancy and leave, contingent on her developing a detailed transition plan for her maternity leave. Walking out of that conference room, Claire's professional mask finally cracked. She sagged against Ethan in the elevator, exhaustion written across her face. That was brutal, she said. You were amazing, fierce and professional and completely in control. I don't feel in control. I feel terrified that they're right, that I can't do both, that something has to give. Then we make sure it doesn't. We build systems, get help, divide responsibilities. We do whatever it takes. The wedding planning happened in the margins of everything else. Doctor's appointments, work obligations, preparing for the baby. They kept it small, intimate, just family and close friends. Emma insisted on being maid of honor despite Claire barely knowing her, arguing that sisters-in-law needed to bond. Marcus stood as Ethan's best man, cracking jokes about never thinking he'd see the day Ethan Brooks married the CEO. They chose a venue overlooking the water, a historic building with floor-to-ceiling windows and winter light that turned everything golden. January in the city was cold and unpredictable, but their wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect winter morning that felt like a gift. Ethan stood at the altar watching Claire walk down the aisle on her mother's arm, and his breath caught. She was 4 months pregnant now, just starting to show, wearing a simple ivory dress that highlighted the soft curve of her stomach. She was radiant, glowing with a happiness that transformed her completely from the exhausted CEO he'd met in that bar 14 months ago. The ceremony was short, personal. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Ethan's turn to speak, he took Claire's hands and said the words he'd been rehearsing for weeks. "Claire, I walked into a bar on the worst night of my life and found you on yours. I made a stupid joke, asked the wrong question, and somehow stumbled into the best thing that ever happened to me. You've taught me what it means to be brave, to fight for what matters, to choose love even when it's complicated. I promise to keep choosing you, every single day, through every challenge and joy that comes. I promise to be present, to show up, to be the partner and father our family deserves. I promise to love you exactly as you are. Brilliant, fierce, vulnerable, perfect." Claire was crying before he finished, tears streaming down her face despite her obvious efforts to maintain composure. When it was her turn, she had to pause twice to collect herself. "Ethan, you saw me when I'd forgotten how to see myself. You reminded me that success without connection is just emptiness dressed up in achievement. You made me brave enough to want more than just professional validation. You gave me permission to be fully human instead of just fully capable." Her voice broke. "I promise to never take you for granted, to prioritize us even when work demands everything, to build a life that honors both our ambitions and our love. I promise to be your partner in every sense, equal, supportive, present. And I promise to build a family with you that's rooted in the honesty and courage we've shown each other from that first night." When they kissed, Marcus cheered loud enough to make half the guests laugh, and Emma was sobbing so hard that Michael had to hand her tissues. Catherine smiled with quiet satisfaction, and Rachel whispered to her kids that this was what real love looked like. The reception was joyful chaos, dancing and toasts and laughter that filled the space. Sandra gave a speech about Claire's leadership that managed to be both professional and deeply personal. Emma told embarrassing stories about Ethan's childhood that made him groan and Claire laugh until she had to sit down. Marcus proposed a toast to the most complicated office romance in history, and everyone drank to that. But the moment Ethan would remember most clearly came late in the evening, when the crowd had thinned and he found Claire standing by the windows looking out at the city lights reflecting off the water. "Tired?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Exhausted, happy, overwhelmed, all of it." She leaned against him. "We did it. We actually did it." "Had doubts?" "So many doubts. But not about you. Never about you." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach, where their baby was growing. "Do you think we're ready for this? For marriage and parenthood and building an entire life together?" "I think nobody's ever ready, but we're doing it anyway." "That's a terrible philosophy for success." "Good thing we're not trying to succeed. We're trying to love each other and raise a child and be happy. That's different." Claire turned to face him fully. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from my wife. She's kind of brilliant." "Your wife is terrified she's going to mess this all up." "Then we'll mess it up together and figure it out as we go." Ethan kissed her softly. "That's what we do. We figure it out." The pregnancy progressed with its own challenges. Claire experienced morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, exhaustion that made board meetings feel like marathons, and physical changes that frustrated her even as she marveled at them. Ethan went to every doctor's appointment, held her hair when she was sick, rubbed her feet when they swelled, and learned more about pregnancy than he'd ever imagined needing to know. Work became a careful balance. Claire developed her maternity leave transition plan, identifying which responsibilities would be temporarily delegated and which required her direct involvement even while out. She trained her COO to handle day-to-day operations and set up systems for remote consultation on major decisions. She was determined to prove that motherhood didn't diminish her leadership, that women could have both career and family without sacrifice. But the reality was harder than the determination. By her 7th month, Claire was exhausted constantly, struggling to maintain the energy and focus that had always come naturally. She snapped at board members during meetings, cried over minor frustrations, and had a complete breakdown one evening when she couldn't fit into any of her professional clothes. "I look like I swallowed a beach ball," she sobbed into Ethan's shoulder. "I can't think straight half the time. I'm emotional about everything, and yesterday I fell asleep during a budget review." "A budget review, Ethan. That's literally my job." You're growing a human being. That's also literally your job right now. I can't do both. Sandra was right, the board was right, everyone was right. I can't be CEO and pregnant and functional. So be CEO and pregnant and imperfect. The world won't end. But Claire's perfectionism wouldn't allow for imperfection, not until the universe forced her hand. At 32 weeks, she went into early labor. Ethan got the call at work, Claire's voice tight with pain and fear, saying she was at the hospital and he needed to come now. He ran. Actually ran out of the office, leaving his computer on and his projects half finished, and caught a cab to the hospital where Claire was already in a room, hooked up to monitors, doctors talking about contractions and cervical dilation and the need to stop labor if possible. The babies are too early, Claire said, reaching for Ethan's hand. They need more time. Babies? Ethan repeated, his brain catching on the plural. What do you mean babies? The doctor smiled. You didn't know? Your wife is carrying twins. We saw it on the first ultrasound. Ethan looked at Claire, who had the grace to look sheepish through her pain. I wanted to surprise you, and then with everything happening, I kept waiting for the right moment, and then it never came, and she gasped as another contraction hit. Twins! They were having twins. Ethan sat down heavily in the chair beside Claire's bed, trying to process this information while doctors worked to stop her labor. Twins. 2 babies. Twice the joy, twice the terror, twice everything they'd been preparing for. The doctors managed to stop the contractions with medication and bed rest orders. Claire was furious about the bed rest, arguing that she had a company to run, but her obstetrician was firm. You want these babies to survive? You stay in bed. No work, no stress, complete rest until at least 37 weeks. That's the deal. So Claire came home and spent the next 5 weeks essentially imprisoned in their bedroom, working remotely when the doctors allowed and climbing the walls when they didn't. Ethan took leave from work to care for her, bringing meals and books and entertainment, fielding calls from the office, and protecting her from anything stressful. Emma visited almost daily, keeping Claire company and helping Ethan prepare the nursery. They'd planned for 1 baby. Now they needed space and supplies for 2. The apartment that had seemed spacious suddenly felt small, but they made it work, converting Ethan's photography corner into a second crib area and reorganizing everything to accommodate double the equipment. Catherine came to stay the last 2 weeks, taking over household management so Ethan could focus on Claire. She cooked and cleaned and told stories about raising Claire and Rachel, offering wisdom that only came from experience. Twins run in our family, Catherine mentioned casually one afternoon while folding tiny onesies. My grandmother had twins. I suppose I should have warned Claire it was a possibility. That would have been helpful information, Ethan said dryly. Where's the fun in that? Life is more interesting with surprises. The babies came at 38 weeks, right on schedule according to the doctor's revised timeline. Claire's water broke at 3 in the morning, and suddenly everything that had seemed theoretical became urgently real. The hospital, the labor, the pain and fear, an incredible transformation of bringing life into the world. Ethan held Claire's hand through 12 hours of labor, watching her be stronger and braver than he'd ever seen anyone be. She cried and cursed and squeezed his hand hard enough to bruise, and when the first baby finally came, a boy, healthy and screaming, she sobbed with relief and joy. The second baby, a girl, came 17 minutes later, smaller but equally fierce in her protests at being born. The nurses cleaned them and checked them and pronounced them perfect, and then placed both babies in Claire's arms while Ethan stared at his family in complete awe. We have twins, Claire whispered, looking down at the 2 tiny faces. We made these perfect little humans. You made them. I just contributed some DNA. We made them together, and now we get to raise them together. She looked up at him, exhausted and radiant. What should we name them? They'd discussed names endlessly but never settled on anything. Now looking at his son and daughter, Ethan felt something click into place. James, he said, touching his son's tiny hand, after my father. So he can be everything my dad wanted to be but didn't get time for. And Charlotte, Claire added, looking at their daughter, after my grandmother. She was brave and fierce and took no nonsense from anyone. James and Charlotte Brooks, their children, their family. The first weeks home were chaos and sleep deprivation and moments of pure terror when both babies cried simultaneously, and neither parent knew what to do. Emma and Michael helped. Catherine stayed for a month, teaching them how to handle two infants at once. Sandra sent meals from the executive team, along with a card that said, "The board voted to extend your leave. Take the time you need." Claire cried, reading that card, overwhelmed by the support she'd feared wouldn't come. She'd expected judgment, pressure to return early, questions about her commitment. Instead, she found understanding and flexibility she hadn't known existed. "Maybe I was wrong," she said to Ethan one night while they each held a sleeping baby. "Maybe I can have both. Maybe I don't have to choose." "You never had to choose. You just had to let people help you." "I'm terrible at asking for help." "I know, but you're learning." When Claire returned to work after 3 months, it was to a company that had survived without her constant presence. Projects had continued, decisions had been made, the world had kept turning. It was humbling and liberating in equal measure, realizing she wasn't indispensable, that good systems and good people could maintain momentum even when she stepped back. She returned part-time at first, working from home 3 days a week, coming into the office for crucial meetings and strategic planning. Ethan had also restructured his role, moving to a flex schedule that let him handle morning childcare while Claire focused on work, then taking over in the afternoons when she worked from home. It wasn't perfect. There were days when both babies were sick and work deadlines loomed and neither of them had slept more than 2 hours. There were moments of frustration, of feeling pulled in too many directions, of wondering if they'd taken on too much. But there were also mornings when Ethan would watch Claire feed Charlotte while talking through a business strategy on speakerphone, effortlessly managing both roles. There were evenings when he'd come home to find her on the floor with both babies, all three of them laughing at something only they understood. There were nights when they'd finally get both kids to sleep and collapse on the couch together, exhausted but happy. "We're doing it," Claire said one such night, her head on Ethan's shoulder. "We're actually making this work. Did you doubt we would?" "Every single day. But every day we figure it out a little better." James and Charlotte grew from helpless infants into curious babies, developing personalities that delighted and challenged their parents. James was cautious, observant, content to watch the world before engaging with it. Charlotte was fearless, grabbing everything, demanding attention, already showing signs of her mother's determination. Emma's kids adored their baby cousins, and family gatherings became regular events. Rachel visited more often, and her marriage, which had been struggling when she'd first met Ethan, showed signs of healing. She credited watching Claire and Ethan's relationship, seeing what active partnership looked like. Work evolved too. Ethan got another promotion, this time to marketing director, leading his own team. The whispers about favoritism had finally died, replaced by respect for his actual work. Claire continued as CEO, but with better boundaries, leaving work at reasonable hours, protecting weekends, prioritizing family in ways she'd never thought possible. The board noticed the change in her leadership style, less autocratic, more collaborative, willing to delegate and trust her team. Paradoxically, the company performed better than ever. Turns out a CEO who wasn't burning herself out made better decisions. On James and Charlotte's first birthday, the whole family gathered at Ethan and Claire's apartment, now expanded to include the unit next door, giving them actual space for 2 growing children. Catherine brought her famous cake. Emma organized games. Rachel's kids ran wild with organized chaos. Sandra even stopped by with gifts from the executive team, staying for cake and admitting she'd never thought she'd see Claire Monroe at a kid's birthday party wearing a party hat. "Life is full of surprises," Claire said, holding Charlotte while James systematically destroyed his first cupcake. "Some of them are even good." That night, after everyone had left and the kids were finally asleep, Ethan found Claire standing in the nursery doorway, watching their children sleep. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I'm thinking about the night we met. How I went to that bar expecting nothing and found everything. How one random conversation changed the entire trajectory of my life." She leaned back against him. "If my blind date had shown up, if you'd found the right table, if we'd both just gone home alone, none of this would exist. We'd still be those people, lonely, overworked, missing what mattered. Instead, We're exhausted parents who haven't had a full night's sleep in a year, and somehow that's better? So much better, Ethan confirmed. Claire turned in his arms to face him. I love you. I know I don't say it enough because I'm usually too tired to form complete sentences, but I love you. You're the best decision I ever made. I didn't think you decided. I thought I ambushed you with a bad joke. I decided to sit with you instead of sending you away. I decided to give you my number. I decided to fight for us when it would have been easier to let go. I decided to marry you, have children with you, build this life with you. Every step was a choice, and I'd make every single one again. Even the twin surprise? Especially the twin surprise. Though next time, maybe we discuss these things before springing them on each other? Next time? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Claire laughed. Let me survive the terrible twos first, then we'll discuss next time. They stood together in the quiet apartment, listening to their children breathe, and Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here. The mistakes and miracles, the scandals and surprises, the fears overcome, and love chosen daily. They'd fought for this. Fought the board, fought gossip, fought their own doubts and insecurities. They'd built something real from what should have been just a brief encounter between strangers. 2 years later, Ethan opened his own photography studio, finally pursuing the passion he'd buried for practicality. Claire supported him completely, even investing in the business and helping with strategy. The studio specialized in family portraits, and Ethan discovered he had a gift for capturing authentic moments between people who loved each other. 3 years after that, Claire stepped down as CEO of Apex, choosing to move into consulting work that gave her more control over her time. She'd proven everything she needed to prove, to the board, to herself, to the industry. Now she wanted to spend more time watching her children grow, supporting her husband's dreams, and building a life that was rich in connection rather than just achievement. They moved to a house outside the city with a yard where James and Charlotte could play. Ethan converted the garage into a photography studio and darkroom. Claire set up a home office where she consulted with companies on leadership and work-life integration. They hosted Sunday dinners for family, took vacations where phones stayed off, and built traditions that would shape their children's memories. On the anniversary of the night they'd met, 5 years after that chance encounter in the bar, Ethan took Claire back to the Copper Bell. They sat at the same corner table where everything had started, ordered the same wine, and remembered who they'd been when they walked in. I was so broken that night, Claire said, so convinced I had to choose between success and happiness. And now? Now I know that's a false choice. Success without happiness is just dressed up emptiness. But happiness without purpose feels hollow too. We need both. And do you have both? Claire looked at her husband, the man who'd made a stupid joke and changed her world, who'd fought for their love when it was hard, who'd become an incredible father and partner. She thought about their children at home with Emma babysitting, probably getting spoiled with too much ice cream. She thought about the consulting work she loved, the family she'd built, the life they were creating together. I have everything, she said, not because it was easy or perfect, but because we chose it, because we kept choosing it every single day. Ethan raised his glass. To questionable decisions. Claire clinked her glass against his, smiling at the callback to their first toast. To the best questionable decision I ever made. They drank, and in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of who they'd been and the promise of who they were becoming, both of them understood that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth fighting for, worth choosing, worth building a life with despite every complication and challenge. They'd found that in each other. And every day since, they chose it again. The bar closed down eventually, replaced by a trendy restaurant that neither of them ever visited. But sometimes, walking past the building where it used to be, they'd pause and remember. Remember the worst night that became the best night. Remember the joke that became destiny. Remember how one risky step forward turned loss into family, loneliness into love, and fear into a future they built together. James and Charlotte grew up hearing the story of how their parents met. The wrong night, the wrong place, the right person. They heard about the investigation, the struggle, the choice to fight for love even when it was complicated. And they learned from watching their parents that real love wasn't dramatic gestures or perfect romance. It was showing up every day, choosing each other through difficulty, building something solid from honest foundation. When James was older, struggling with his own relationship challenges, Ethan told him what Catherine had once said: "You stay when it's hard. That's what love is. Not the easy moments, but the choice to stay when everything says run." When Charlotte was older, facing pressure to choose between career and personal life, Claire told her something she'd learned the hard way. You don't have to choose. You just have to be brave enough to fight for both and humble enough to ask for help along the way. The story didn't end with a wedding or babies or any single milestone. It continued in the daily choices they made, to prioritize each other, to support each other's dreams, to raise their children with love and honesty. It continued in the way Ethan still looked at Claire like she hung the moon, in the way Claire still sought Ethan's opinion before major decisions, in the way they'd learned to be partners in every sense of the word. Years later, when Ethan's photography was featured in a major gallery showing, Claire was the first person he thanked in his speech. "My wife taught me to be brave enough to pursue what I loved instead of what was safe. She gave me permission to be fully myself." Years later, when Claire published a book on leadership and work-life integration that became a bestseller, Ethan was the first person she dedicated it to. "My husband taught me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. He showed me what it means to be truly present." They grew old together, watching their children become adults, eventually becoming grandparents themselves. They traveled to all the places they'd once dreamed about. They built a life full of purpose and joy and the kind of deep contentment that only comes from choosing the right person and then choosing them again every single day for decades. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the house was empty and they sat together watching the sunset, Claire would turn to Ethan and say, "Thank you for making that terrible joke in the bar." And Ethan would laugh and say, "Thank you for not immediately walking away." Because that's what their love story really was. Not a fairy tale with perfect beginnings, but a real story about two broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment and had the courage to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate lives. A story about choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, and partnership over perfection. A story that started with the wrong night and the wrong place, but ended up being exactly right.